Hey, welcome to Mass Media Talk. It's Stacy Tyler and Brian Howard here to talk all things mass media. We're taking on this week mass media content, all kinds of fun things this week. They're always fun, of course, but we like to dig into them. Stacy, where do you want to start this week? We talked about a lot of things in this chapter. We've got electronic games. We've got what's called next step reality. We've got the differentiating genres of entertainment, information, all that kind of stuff. So let's jump in where you want to.
Should we start with the next step reality formula?
Yeah, let's do that. So let's talk about what is that?
That's a great question. Yeah, so everything's kind of rooted in reality because people have to relate to what they're watching, but there's always an element of fantasy to it. And I think one really successful model of that is all of the Marvel films.
Sure.
You know, they're all related. They're all based in this world. Well, most of them are. And then there's an element of that fantasy of the superhero, you know, that for whatever, you know, was given powers or created their own powers. We've got Tony Stark, you know, becoming a superhero in his own way, but they all are rooted in reality. And I think it's important to point out that it's okay that we enjoy watching these things. Some of us want to escape the reality that we're currently in. You know, who of us, you know, wouldn't want to be a superhero from time to time? But I think it's just important for us to recognize perhaps what the aspect of fantasy is and not get too caught up in that in our everyday lives.
Sure. And it's not like, you know, back in the old days, remember, I think it was the last chapter talking about the people so upset they left those poor guys from Gilligan's Island and lost on that island for all those years. Why didn't they just go rescue them instead of, you know, I think, you know, most people's media literacy, except for maybe little children, is beyond that. But I think the other part of that, you know, that next step thing is that our lives are pretty boring, really. So if movies and TV shows were about our lives, even reality TV is not reality, right? There's some incident. So Big Brother, you've got some parameters, so it makes it, you know, salacious and exciting. You know, the old follow somebody around with a camera, put cameras all over your house and watch you get up, make breakfast, It's really boring. And so, yeah, that's why the next step, so we can kind of see ourselves or partly the reality, and then we take that next step into, you know, some sort of fantasy. I think most movies are that way, right? There's that inciting incident where walking along and all of a sudden this strange creature called E.T. finds you, and it's like, oh, now it's like, wow. And think about it, you know, most movies have some sort of element, even the ones that are more grounded in reality, guns and, you know, fighting. You know, how many times can you get shot at and not get hit because you're just so awesome that way. So I think that's a good thing for us to remember. But there is still some things to be aware of, because knowing, I think, especially with the kind of the reality part of it. So, you know, there is a lot of stuff that's sort of kind of scripted. So even though, like The Bachelor, I mean, is that all natural? No, it's not. You know, kind of give them some things to say and only shoot things. If people can see the behind the scenes, they'll shoot tight shots and other things and edit it out of sequence. So when you know, a girl gives the nasty look to the other girl, that was last week, you know. but you edit in the tight shot and it looks great. Just to do it for that kind of thing. So I think that's important for us to remember. But yeah, most things, I think a lot of things that fail because they get too far beyond reality. And like in movies, if suddenly, you know, it's so way out of beyond what could, you know, possibly happen, right? As if witches come and, you know, whatever. But at least that seems like it could happen in our reality world. And then, you know, we don't want something so out of this world crazy to have. It's like, oh, that was fake. Of course, the rest of it was fake too, but that was too fake. Kind of thing.
So true. And I think we have to remember that the whole reason that these television shows exist, they have to get good ratings if they want to continue. And so to get ratings, there has to be something sensational enough that people want to watch it. That's the whole purpose. And so that's why there are producers and directors. They orchestrate a lot of the things that you see, even though it may appear more natural. And I think, you know, we've seen that goal go swing, you know, the pendulum has swung completely the other way with a lot of reality television. And I think, I don't know about you, Brian, I think it's kind of tapered off a little bit. I haven't noticed as many new reality type shows in the last couple of years. And I don't know what the reason for that is, other than obviously they just must not be making
Yeah.
money. There must not
Pulling
be
down agents.
selling as
Well,
much. Yeah.
yeah, I was stunned the Big Brother it's still going on, isn't it? I mean, I haven't, I remember kind of sort of keeping track. This is 20 years ago now that it started out. But I think things like The Voice and American Idol had its
American
reboot.
Idol,
Those are
yes.
reality, and those competitions like that seem to do okay on cable channels. You have like the, Next Network All Star, Food Network All Star, something like that. Those seem to do okay. But the ones, falling around like Big Brother or The Survivor, I haven't seen anything like that do so well. There's a brief period where game shows came back for a while and they, you know, did really well, but who wants
Yeah.
to watch suitcases open, for that movie? It's just a little bit too much. So I think you see some ebb and flow, but yeah, bottom line, right? You got to make money. I think one of the things we can remember as consumers is just like if we go into a store and we don't buy certain products over time, then they'll quit showing up in the stores,
Yeah.
right? So what we watch does make a difference. So, and then, so pay attention to what we watch. If we watch really cruddy stuff, then they'll keep making it because we keep watching.
It's so true. It's so true. And I wish that there were more. I was really impressed with the new Lord of the Rings series on Amazon Prime. It's one of the cleanest shows I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
And I hope it's really successful. I hope it does really well because, I think it's something for all ages. And I feel like that's so rare anymore that you can have
Yeah.
a show that, does really well and performs well based on just that it's a good storyline, not that it has all of this, sensationalism or sex or violence or,
Yeah.
all the different elements there. Yeah.
It's good storytelling. Yeah, not an advertisement, but that's, I do use VidAngel and, because
Awesome.
there's some good stuff and I would like to see. And so obviously there's some things you can't cut it all out, when
Yes.
you see the bleeped out word, that's like, okay, but if it's done correctly, there are some shows that really with some minor editing are pretty good,
Yeah.
and they just add a few things in there. And so not that I'm, if I got a commission, I would tell everyone to go out and subscribe now, but wait for my affiliate link on my website until just wait a few days. So we're talking about different genres, and the goal was to figure out why programmers do what they do. And so we have different types, narratives, informing like news and advertising designed to persuade. Some of it's all rolled up into one, but let's take on, narratives. What exactly does that mean? And we kind of talked about that. We're talking about next step. Most of that is narrative type entertainment.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's important to maybe sit down and analyze content that you watch. Is the purpose of it to inform, to persuade, to sell, to entertain? What is the purpose of the content that I'm watching? And I think sometimes those can be blurred a little bit. And so it's valuable just to be able to ask those questions. The first section it talks about here is informing. And I love that it brings up the 6 questions that journalists try to answer. We try to answer in every story that we cover: who, what, where, when, why, and how. And that is an important part of being able to tell a good story and be able to cover a story well, as being able to answer as many of those questions as possible. And so it talks a little bit about the simplified extended conflict. So looking for, most stories, if there is no conflict or no, then it generally doesn't make the news, because there has to be some reason, typically, unless we have, the water skiing squirrel, that's just simply to entertain. But most news needs to have some kind of conflict in it, and that's why journalists should be covering and looking at different angles and multiple sides of a story to be able to cover it well and provide as much information as possible. And so that, I don't know if sometimes we can take that over the top. Some journalists tend to become more sensational in the way that they cover news. And that's, I think, unfortunate, because it really skews the purpose of good journalism.
Yeah, I agree. I tell students it's unfortunate when the top news story is when someone does something good, like, hey, this 12-year-old found a wallet with $200 in it and he gave him back, because that means that's unusual, right? So news is typically unusual. And so, yeah, if, a mass murder is no longer newsworthy, we should be concerned, right? Because now bad things are no longer. So, yeah, there's got to be some conflict. But when you think about this, there's conflict in almost everything. That's what makes it interesting. So you're walking home from wherever, you walk in the door, and who's ever there says, hey, how was your day? It's like, yeah. But you're walking home and you see, somebody, you run into a house and it bursts on fire. Then you come home screaming, hey, well, guess what happened? Because there was a conflict. Something happened. So there's always something like that. Otherwise, so that's why narrative has, tragic events or, that kind of thing. I mean, really boring. Same thing in news. Well, it's another great day. I'd hate to be the weather person, in one of those climates like Arizona or Hawaii. It's high of 85, a low of 72. It might rain sometime, but it's like, okay, who wants to watch that weather? That's not interesting. That's why we're drawn to when a hurricane's coming.
Yes.
Even if it's 1,000 miles away, then it's conflict and drama. And that's the good and the bad, because you want your audience. So if you're the Weather Channel, that's the time people are watching. So you have constant video, constant update, even though there's nothing new. And then they put the reporter out there, the one, it's raining. And, why do they do that? I mean, yeah, it's like, okay, no one should come out here, but here I am, I'm getting blown away. And the only reason to do that is for, video op, is to show, there's certainly nothing terribly wrong with that, but just understanding, that's how it works. And as you mentioned, I think there's an increasing blurring line, and it's hard because if you're producing news, you got to have advertisers. You don't want to infuriate them by, exposing all of their bad deeds all the time, but you still want to be true to your craft. And so there's this delicate line that they walk of being entertaining, still putting forth good news and journalism. And you're right, there's probably some producers out there who are more concerned. I had a producer, she's lovely. If she ever sees this, don't, Donna, it's great. I love you. But, she loved houses she loved fire. So if there's fire, she was our producer for our 10 o'clock news. We got flames to lead, even if it was just flames and it wasn't that big a deal, but it drew in attention, right? So anytime there were flames, it was the top of the newscast. And, that's just kind of the way that works.
It's true. And everyone's heard the old phrase, if it bleeds, it leads, right?
That's right. Yeah. Ours was it burns, it leads, right?
Yes. got a little, different variation, but a similar idea for sure. Yeah. So I think it's important to, think about, is it persuading? Is it, is it informing? Is it selling? Is it entertaining? And they've got in the persuading section here talking about puffery, and I had to chuckle at some of the anecdotes here because we see it so often with advertising. Well, X is the best selling product of its kind. Well, what kind? Or X has better cleaning action. Better than what? Better than another brand? Better than not cleaning at all? Like, but we see this kind of advertising all the time, and I think. Like we've talked about, sometimes we buy things out of loyalty to a specific brand, and it's good to think about that. Why am I loyal to that brand? Is it because my mom used it? Is it because it works really well? Or is it just because it's something I've purchased for a long time, and I just haven't bothered to venture out and try something new? And think about that, and maybe even look at ads that do persuade you to purchase. What was it about that particular ad that was successful in persuading you?
I tell my kids I pursued a doctoral degree so I could be one of the 4 of the 5 doctors. I could be that 5th doctor that can but that's the thing. What kind of doctors? I mean, I have a doctoral degree in, adult education, but it certainly doesn't qualify me to say anything about any sort of medicine, right? So 4 to 5 doctors. True. What kind of doctors? They could be witch doctors. What does it mean?
That's such a great point. So important.
Yeah. And the same thing, the interesting persuasion has changed a lot. If you go back and look at early commercials back in the 50s, 60s, they were very straightforward as far as the convincing. You'll buy this cereal, either one, the star eats the cereal, or they say, hey, buy this, Crisco because it's going to make your pie crust so flaky and wonderful. And there's still some of that. Now it's a lot more of, like we talked about last week with psychographics, is trying to get more of our psychology. So, car ads, look at them. Most of them don't extol the benefits of the engine, the tires, the brakes, or anything like that, with a few exceptions. It's most a lifestyle. Subaru does a real good job of this. Lifestyle, save the trees, all that kind of stuff. So they're out driving through the woods, and and then safety. So they're extolling the benefits of the car's safety, but it's more of a type of personality. You see that Lexus, like who's driving it, what house are they driving to, how are the people dressed, and so it's not so much buy this car because it's the best car. Buy this car because you want to be like one of those categories we talked about in Strive and vows, right? And so I think that's important. The persuasion isn't always out and out. You buy this because it's got all these great benefits. The persuasion is, just like those popular people at high school, they dressed a certain way. You thought, if I dress that way, maybe I'll be popular too. It didn't work, but
It's true. Or I've seen a lot of commercials when thinking about cars that have a kind of a story built in, a family out camping and having a really great time. And, I think, oh, wow, I could go camping with my family and, I need this new car. And so we see that a lot. And we see that with influencers too, talking about, selling products and, oh, I really use this, or my kids love it, or this is the best thing I've found. And, we're listening to that persuasive angle, and, it's because we trust that person. So lots of different reasons for sure.
Yeah. And some turn that on the end. They make fun of it. So like the commercial for insurance, it says, studies show that people pay more attention if it's young people having fun. So they have all the people out at the pool holding up their iPads with insurance, hey, insurance, and they're having fun. So they're kind of mocking the whole thing, but, it kind of turns it on its ear a little bit, because we know what's going on, and making fun of it maybe makes it work. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
That's true. Humor can often go a long way. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Should we talk about video games?
Yeah, let's talk about video games. So what do you think? So I have a son that's into them. You have a husband that's really into video games, which is good. What's your husband's game of choice?
He loves games with a great storyline. And so like Horizon Zero Dawn is one that he's really loved. My daughters have played that. But he also loves games that are fun puzzles, like puzzle games that, you have to think about and work through, and team building games. I have a daughter that's on an esports team, and I would argue that she, is learning many of the same skills that you would learn playing a competitive outdoor sport, or, basketball or something. She's learning how to work with a team and learning how to talk and communicate with each other. And so I think so often, Brian, you and I were talking about this last week, but so often we have that stereotype in our mind of what a video gamer is like, like the middle-aged guy in his parents' basement,
and his t-shirt that hasn't been washed in 3 weeks kind of thing.
Exactly.
Eating Doritos and gaming nonstop.
Yeah. And I think that stereotype has changed so much in the last even 5 years with Twitch, and with, we were talking about, just some of the popular games that have come up since, just in the last few years. And I think that it's good to be able to recognize a medium's value. And I think that there's a lot of good that can come out of the video game medium. And I wish people would recognize that a little bit more. Yeah. It's a interesting balance, right? Because anything where you consume a lot of time, and the perceived value, of course, what is that? I have noticed, like with my son, so he it's a social experience. He plays with 2 of his cousins, and really enjoys it. And he's not the most outgoing most of the time, although recently he's been more outgoing. But I listen to him giving commands as their team is going through doing something, and it's like, man, he's the captain of the ship. He's telling them what to do. It's like, wow, I've never heard him talk like that. He's down there, no, go this way, do that, and tell them all these things. Like, wow. So yeah, there is some team building with that, because they're planning, they're doing strategy, they're working together at the same time. Of course, at the same time, if you're planning and building strategy and you're doing it for 10 hours at a time, that could lead to some problems, right? So there are definitely are some things like that. But as we mentioned, some people will, now that it's easy to binge watch, you can watch a full season of whatever, and you can do the same thing.
and except you're watching your favorite, sitcom or drama or whatever it is, and you just decide to sit through the whole thing. And so anything like that, I suppose, can be an issue. But I think that the concept of telescoping is really interesting because most video games have that built in. It's not like you're one and done. You do this and then, yay, I won. There's always the next level, always the next adventure kind of thing, which again is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just to realize it's built into the game so you continue to play, and, it builds up that endorphins, that rush. I'm getting to the next level. And if we understand that, and we're okay with that, and we can have, I guess, a little self-control so we're not playing 24/7. But
It's true.
yeah. I think
And
so.
I've noticed my kids and my husband really get in there. Another term is flow, and just, it's kind of like being in the transported state, right? You're so focused on playing that game, and you don't see anything that's going on in the world around you.
Right.
And sometimes that's good. I think it's good sometimes to be able to take yourself to a new place, but I think we also have to be careful, like you said, that we don't maybe take it over the top and do that. And there's a video game I wanted to just talk briefly about. It's called That Dragon Cancer. It came out a few years ago, and I thought it changed my life because it was a video game that was created by a family whose young son was diagnosed with terminal cancer when he was 1. And so the video game is actually you going through them making decisions about their son's life and going through cancer treatment, going through, just some of the struggles that families face. And it really gives you just a really interesting look at how families go through difficult circumstances like this. But I think playing it in a video game and having to make some of the choices or not being able to make choices at certain points was a really unique way to tell his story, and a way that would not maybe have been as effective in a video form or, watching it in a television series or something like that. And so that was a really powerful, I think, way to me that video games can really help you see a different perspective or a new side of something that you would not be able to do in any other way.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Give you more of a first person perspective, and that
Yes.
just like anything else, that could be great because now it puts you in that decision making mode. I suppose the games that worry me the most are the ones, the rated M, they're combat, and you're a first person shooter and you're killing lots of people, especially the ones that are very graphic. And I think, the military actually uses simulations to train people. So it's not very easy to pull a trigger and kill somebody. I mean, most of us hopefully never have to do that, right? But if that's what your job is in the Army, Navy, and you've got an enemy, you've got to do that. So how do you train people to do that? Well, you give simulations. So they've done it before. And so that is a concern, is that you get a lot of those that are extremely violent and also very graphic. Then you've experienced that first person. And so it's almost so lifelike, you could get desensitized to it. So that's one of the things I would say, something to be wary of, because obviously if the military uses that to train people so they're okay to pull a trigger, it's like, that's a little disconcerting. However, on the flip side, just like you talked about, this one puts you in the driver's seat for the care of someone who's dealing with cancer. What decisions do you make? And so those kind of things, instead of just watching it passively, now you're part of the decision making, and it can change your whole perspective. So I think, just like anything else, the pros and the cons, but I think that's really cool. I'd never heard of that one. So while you're talking, I looked it up and said, oh, that looks interesting. I'll have to check that out more.
It's a heart-wrenching story. But I learned a lot from it, and I think it's worth putting some time into, and it's only got a couple of hours of playtime. So it's not, not some major multi-level
Right, absolutely.
game. Yeah, for sure.
One thing you mentioned in here, Steve, let's talk about this for just a second, because I think it's interesting. Because currently right now, I serve in a stake presidency, and I talk to a lot of kids in a different way than I talk to them in the classroom. And so dating is a big issue. So we recently did we called it speed friending, and we had 300 kids show up. We put 3 rows together. We had about 300 kids, and we gave them some questions to ask each other for about 90 seconds, and they'd switch and talk to the next person. Well, that was in person, but so many of the people I talk to that come in, they're getting married, they're working on their temple recommends to get married. How did you meet? Very many met on a social media dating site.
Interesting.
whether it's mutual or one of the myriad of others, and that's an interesting phenomenon. It's the one that I'm not that comfortable with because that was not happening. And when it first started, it was like, yeah, whatever, you met online. Now it's just pretty normal. I mean, if you got a group of people who've been married in the last 10 years and you ask 100 of them have they met on either social media, Facebook, or through a dating site, you probably have a pretty good percentage. And it's changed things. It's so interesting how it's changed geographically. You don't have to live in the same area. I mean, the dating pool
That's a good point.
now doesn't necessarily, you don't have to live in exactly the same area, although you don't want to fly to Russia all the time. Although people do that. But I think that's interesting that these type of things have, added to that. Even gaming, you meet people and you, can meet a lot of people you don't know, and you can form relationships.
Absolutely.
And it's not necessarily dating, but it could be friendship, or it could, lead to something beyond that. But kind of change the dynamic of how things work. Just in the last probably about 15 years, I'd say more than anything, as internet speeds have increased, and it's much more easier to talk face to face or not just send cryptic text message in chat rooms like when they first started those crazy chat groups. They were crazy.
Well, I remember meeting people, when this was initially first happening, that had met online and thinking that they were completely insane. But
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, it's certainly changed. And I'm curious I guess there must be more trust built into the way that you can find people now, because that's always been my biggest hang up is how could you possibly trust somebody that you've met online? I don't know.
Well, I'm sure there's fails as well. I think it's part of the nature of, for me, I didn't grow up with that, but so many of people who are in that, 18 to 25 prime age for dating and marriage, they've grown up with all the social media. It's been part of their lives.
That's true.
And so I think it's not as big a deal. And I think, like we talked about, in trusting, and even like you set up an account, older generations, they're really distrustful about, I don't want to give up that information. This age group is pretty okay about giving up some basic information to get a free service and that kind of thing. So I think it falls in it. Of course, there's scary stories you hear all the time, but
Yes.
but also, there's a lot of good connections that people make because they have that
success, too.
opportunity. And sometimes
hopefully-
it's over. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and hopefully it sounds like far more success stories than negative stories, which
Yeah,
is
well, I only hear the successes because they're coming in to get married. I don't hear the other ones who, the guy burned them or dropped them, or it wasn't exactly what he said he was or she said she was, And
Yeah.
of course, we only hear the really horrific ones where someone, gets like killed or something like that.
Yes. Yes.
We hear those, but there's probably hundreds of near misses, not for death, but near misses like, didn't quite work out, or, wow, that guy was creepy, or that girl was not what I thought she was going to be, kind of thing.
And we've heard all of these new so much new terminology too, gaslighting, ghosting.
Yes, yes.
Like all these different things that you can do to someone online, that that you've been dating for a while. So it certainly opens up a whole new realm of, possibility. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's a great example.
Yeah. My soapbox on that one before we move on to something else is I actually liked, progress is good. I actually liked in the old days that there was a gatekeeper for young people, and your phone was a one phone in your house, and it might be mom or dad who answered the phone. You had to, took a lot of guts to call up Susie if you knew that Susie's dad might answer the phone. You just hoped and prayed he didn't. And if he did, then you had to, in your squeaky voice, like, and good thing you could hang up because there wasn't caller ID.
That's true.
but also worked it. But now, you just click a text and it's going to go directly to the person. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's bad because people often do things they shouldn't just because, it's no one's observing it. But it has changed the whole social, how that works. Text, traded numbers, text back and forth, through social media back and forth.
Definitely.
No more gatekeepers. Mom and dad the floodgates are gone. As soon as that child gets their first smartphone at 14, 15, 16, 17, whatever the parent decides, you do have some control, but not complete. It certainly is not complete, But my wife and I used to make fun of one of my sons. We'd we'd periodically review his text, and if he's talking to a girl, I would be the girl voice, and we'd read the text. So we had fun with that. I think we probably scarred him for life. I'm sorry. So therapy bill is coming, but it was. But our idea was,
okay, Brian.
we're going to review your text occasionally just to see what's going on. I think just knowing that that could happen, that you're going to review them, might, stop you from saying something dumb that you might otherwise do. And so there's always, not that it completely, because we read the funny text, so that was fun.
We do that with my daughter. I have a daughter that's in high school, and we do periodically review her texts as well. But I have never read them out loud with her, so that's a new one.
Do that.
We're gonna have to try.
Have your husband be the guy voice, and go through and say, "Oh, how you doing today?" Man, it's fun. But again, you might scar them for life, so don't recommend it.
Oh, that's great. I think just another thing I'd like to just briefly mention is we're talking about increasing media literacy with this chapter.
Yeah.
And we've talked about, the purpose of, different mass media content is just to think about conspiracy theories and how they're always rooted a little bit in reality. But
don't
most
tell
of it
anybody
is
we have a conspiracy theory right here. We're trying to get people to study mass media. That's our, no, I'm just kidding. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
We're gonna start it. Yes. And so I think it's important to remember if there's fear is a huge component of conspiracy theories, as is strong emotional response. So if it makes you really upset, I think it's just so important to just take a minute and look at the source, take a look at where it came from, and make sure that you can trace that information back to a reputable source before you pass it on, but certainly before you adopt it into your own belief system.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, that two-step flow thing happens. Someone else might see something on social media and then they tell you. And the good thing, first thing to ask is, who said that? Where did it come from?
Yeah.
And if they don't know, then I would start to discount it immediately. And if they do know, that's okay. Then you can go check out the source for yourself. But I think you're absolutely right. Things get shared, and sometimes there's a little bit of truth. But you got to think, if a lot of times we want to share, we always want to share our best side or the side that we want people to see. So a lot of stuff we're going to see on social media, even stuff that may seem like it's from, legitimate source, be wary and look into it. And, always think, for a journalist, they come into a situation that's from a perspective they don't see everything. And so, you got to remind yourself, as my dean used to always say, it's a pretty thin pancake that doesn't have two sides, right? There's always some perspective that we don't see. So, and this is hard to do, is to think, what didn't get shown in that news story? What other perspective might have been shared? And that's good practice, whether or not, if you completely agree with something, you might want to think, okay, that's my opinion. Why do I completely agree? Is there another opinion that might be out there? And that might save us from, getting really divisive. And I don't know that we can ever totally escape that, but I think we can certainly contribute or not contribute to the flames if we, pass on something, and we all know, like we were talking there, yes, there are conspiring men in the latter days. There certainly are conspiratorial things out there, but the bottom line is, you better make sure before you pass it along that there's some legitimate sources. And I think most of the stuff we see is propaganda is a strong term, but it's hyperbole. It's puffed up, made bigger than it is, just like political advertising. This candidate stole the gazillion dollars, right? And did that really happen? According to the fine print, probably not exactly like that, right? He threw grandmas over the cliff. It's like, I don't think that's happening, because, there's guilt by association. I think that's important, because right now that is big, and they come, and it's not exclusive to any one political party. You remember the vast right-wing conspiracy by Hillary Clinton. Then on the flip side, you've got this last election where the big conspiracy stealing the election. And so whenever it works best for your goal, then, throwing out some pretty big hyperbole and getting people thinking about it gets people riled up, especially the base of any, group, or people who are a little bit more, probably more involved, perhaps, kind of like the people at a ball game who are, don't have a shirt on and have their face painted and that kind of, they're into it. They're going to scream, as opposed to others. I was like, hey, who is that guy over there? You were right, though. Why do you think they're, at this stage, I'm going to guess I could kind of answer myself. Social media probably plays a note. Why do you think there's so much more of that now? because there's always been, I mean, JFK, there's conspiracy theories. I mean, a movie's made about it, but now it's like every other day there's some new thing going on.
That's a great question. I don't know if it's just because I feel like every year the bar gets raised a little bit into what, what sensational means. And I think everybody wants to dig, dig their feet into something. They want to believe in something. They want to, share something, with other people. And I think just the world has become so much more divisive in recent years too, that we're a lot less likely to, and I speak as on a whole, just the human race. I feel like we're less likely to come together and be able to see different perspectives. And instead, I think people kind of, they look for things that are wrong with the other side or with other, with issues and sink into that. And I think that that's unfortunate. And it's so easy to get caught up in that on social media when it's easy to doctor an image or to
click, share, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so I think it just spreads like wildfire, and people just have not been educated as much as we should have about media literacy to be able to stop it. And I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Why do you think, Brian, why do you think there are more?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think partly just because of the divisiveness that's going on. And so I do think we tend to discount anything that's said against either, if we're talking politics, against the people we support. So someone can throw some arrows and we say, no, I can see that. But on the flip side, if somebody throws some arrows at someone we dislike, we're more easily accepting of that because it's easy to do. And we don't have to put ourselves on the line as much. I'm talking straight to you. There's a certain segment of society who will confront, be very confronting in person. Most of us don't like to do that. But if it's on social media, we can throw it out there. We can, figuratively flame, burn people, throw out things like that. And very rarely does it come home. Right? No, very rarely does somebody come knocking at our door. They might rip us to shreds on social media, and we might feel bad for a minute, but we never actually see them. And so there's no perceived harm. And I really like, especially right now from our church leaders, we're really taught a lot about that. So use the social media for good, but also don't really engage. It's kind of like the Bible bashing they told you not to when you were a missionary, right? Don't get in there and just contention. Contention is not going to lead anywhere.
No.
State your case and stand for what's right. And I also liked a talk given by Elder Holland. It was about athletic events, but he said, don't check your religion at the door. I was like, don't check your religion when you log into Instagram. Continue to believe what you believe. And just because you can rip and shout, think twice. Think who you really are and what's going to be an advantage for that. But, I don't know, but I just think it's our overall media system, whether it's social media or other things. And I think you're right, is we get a little desensitized, so you have to ratchet it up. So things that were crazy, you look back at Richard Nixon's like, whatever, you had some tapes and whatever he did, whatever, that was no big deal, So now we've got, gosh, I feel bad for anybody who runs for public office because you just get run through the mill unless you have lived a perfect life. Even if you have, you probably get criticized for that. You goody two shoes. You should have smoked some marijuana. He better
You're
be
hiding something. Right? Yeah, we can't find anything. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's true.
Well, cool. Well, we probably run our gamut here, but next week, media effects. Oh my gosh, media effects. There's whole courses and multiple courses on media effects. It just never ends. So that's gonna be fun. I think we talk about we're all talking about all this has to do with media effects, but now we're going to look at some actual theories and other things that kind of see where we're impacted most. So I don't know if that's the culminating thing, but it certainly is helpful. We talk about all these different ways and means, and now we say, okay, what impact does it have on the public, people, and other kind of things. So it'll be interesting
stuff. Yes, and only 2 chapters left in our book, which is crazy.
I know.
It always goes by so fast.
It does go by so fast. Well, cool, Stacy. Thanks. Always good to chat. Always some good stuff. We'll look forward to next week. Yeah, and we'll have more fun. See you, everybody.
Sounds great.